If you have not already, please be sure to check out my 4-part documentary series on the history of the Winx Club franchise and my previous 2 videos on the 4Kids and Rye English dubs. These will provide you with the full context necessary to fully follow and enjoy this video. If you don't, you do you, boo, I guess, and thank you for the AdSense. We've discussed the deal between Rainbow and Nickelodeon to distribute, dub, and even co-produce Winx Club in English-speaking regions, so we've pretty much covered most of the ground that we've needed to, at least broadly. However, today we're gonna be laser focusing on the dubbing process specifically, how I feel about the voice cast and direction of this dub, and how it compares to both the original Italian version and the Cinelume dub. Now, it's probably common knowledge that I'm not the biggest fan of the Nickelodeon dub. I don't hate it, and honestly, it's certainly not the worst of the dubs. That spot belongs to Dubbing Brothers, followed by 4Kids. Still, there are aspects of this dub, some in casting, but largely in direction and changes from the script, that make this version of the story far less enjoyable than the Cinelume dub for me. But first, let's cover the voice cast, which honestly is the best part of this dub, because when given proper direction, most of them shine. First, we have Molly Quinn, who plays Alexis on Castle, as Bloom. Ordinarily, I'm not a fan of hyping voice actors or actresses because they physically resemble their characters, yet even so, I have to say that I am impressed by the likeness. Not only does Molly have the same signature fiery red hair, but from what I've seen of her on Castle, at least from her performance as Alexis, she could definitely pull off Bloom's cinnamon roll nature in a live-action production. For the record, we will be discussing the live-action Winx Club series in the future, but for right now, one thing at a time, please, before I die. But that said, what matters most for voice acting is that your voice fits the character, and I have to say, I do kinda dig the lower pitch of Molly's cadence compared to Bloom's other voice actresses. When she speaks naturally, I love her as Bloom, but her issues often come with her voice direction. Sometimes Molly kinda struggles with more emotional moments for Bloom, and when Bloom gets serious, it sounds incredibly cheesy. And her yells, well... yeah! Though to be fair, she did pull it off that one time in the Battle for Magix. I'm not really a fan of Amy Gross' portrayal of Stella. It's clear that she does love and understand the character, but the incredibly high pitch she lends to the character is not up my alley. This is probably because my favorite voice for Stella is Jennifer Seguin in the Cinelume dub, who cadence-wise is pretty much Gross's polar opposite.
Have you heard of Celeria? It's a kingdom far, far away. I was trying to get to Althea Castle in the realm of Magix.
Heard of the magic dimension? It's in another galaxy. I'm Princess of Celeria and Fairy of the Shining Sun, so...
But for what it's worth, Amy did a pretty great job in terms of performance and emotionality, even when her direction and script were not the best. Now at first, I enjoyed Alejandra Reynoso's performance as Flora, given her voice lends itself to Flora as a group mom archetype, in stark contrast to the Fluttershy stereotype she's often misidentified with. Looking at you, 4Kids.
My theory is that if more plants could talk, deforestation would be dramatically reduced. It's worth trying.
My issue with their performance, similar to Molly, is in her direction, specifically her inflections. Oftentimes, Alejandra uses the same inflections for Flora's lines over and over again, the same rhythm and the changes in the pitch of how she speaks.
I totally just snapped at Helia. I made him feel like he let me down, which isn't even true. Freeze. Ground, can you hear me? Help me if you can. The fairy of nature is begging you.
Like Molly, if Alejandra were to be using her natural voice for Flora rather than to try to do whatever her inflections were an attempt to pull off, I definitely would be more inclined to call her one of my favorites. Instead, Alejandra's performance is kinda... It's okay. It's not bad, but it's not all that great either. Pause. I just discovered through a bit of research that Alejandra actually voices Sifa in the 2018 Castlevania series. I have no idea if I'm saying her name right, but goddamn girl. You get that, Brad. You get it. Yeah. Romy Dames has been lauded as the best depiction of Musa, and honestly, I can see why. At first, she seemed to struggle in understanding Musa's tomboyish tendencies.
Nah, it's totally uncool.
But eventually, Romy pulled off Musa's snark to a T.
We could try looking under S for Cyrenix.
Or F for Fat Chance.
Not to mention, Romy also nailed Musa's big emotional moments.
I want to laugh with you and sing together the way we used to. The entire universe is depending on me. I have to go, Mom. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. I love you, Mom.
My issue comes more in my personal preferences, so none of this is on Romy. But at times I felt her voice was way too high energy for how I've always viewed Musa. That's also to mention that I prefer it when voice actors are able to sing for their characters. This is part of the reason why Kate Bristol, who voiced Musa in the duart dub of Winx Club, is currently my favorite voice actress for Musa.
Winged creatures, what are you? You're fairies, you're fairies. I know it's true.
Not to mention, Kate's voice is more laid back than Romy's, hence I feel it's a better fit, but still there is no denying Romy was one of the best voice actresses in the cast. Now, out of the whole cast, I would probably have to say that my least favorite is Morgan Decker as Tecna. Her performance is similar to Jodie Rester in the Cinelume dub, but Morgan's voice is far harsher and raspier, and it's honestly difficult for me to enjoy. She does nail Tecna's angrier moments, but other than that, she seems to struggle with Tecna's nuances as she becomes more emotional.
I'm sure I can figure out how to use these primitive instruments. I can handle the situation, Flora. Don't worry.
And then, Keke Palmer as Aisha. I guess I see what they were going for, but damn, Keke does not fit Aisha's character. Lucinda Davis has held the spot for my favorite performance of Aisha, or Layla, depending on the dub that you watch, primarily because her more quiet, feminine voice lent itself well to Aisha being shyer and more antisocial when we first met her. Virtually all of this was scrubbed away in the Shadow Phoenix special, so that's great. So all Keke really had left to work with was Aisha being a badass heroine who got shit done, which she is, but Keke also had this tendency to be super melodramatic in her line readings. No other scene showcases this quite like her performance during Naboo's death scene.
Ethereal fairies, I beg of you, please, give me the spell of life. No!
No shade on Keke, it's just she was not the right fit for this character. Now, out of all of the Nickelodeon voices, not just the Winx, Larissa Oleynik as Icy is easily my least favorite and the role I consider to be the weakest. Again, it's a case of the actress just not fitting the character she was given. Larissa tries to make Icy sound cool and sly but low-key sinister, but it comes across more as Icy is the lead mean girl in high school, robbing her of any real threat she once presented.
Oh, please, you call that magic? Icy says this is magic!
Jennifer Cody, meanwhile, does fit Darcy, but again, she's super melodramatic in her intonations.
Your ambition, your courage are wasted with the specialists. I know you want more. My sisters and I can make you powerful.
On the bright side, Kimberly Brooks nailed her role as Stormy, and she by far has given my favorite performance of the character.
Don't worry, I promise it will only sting a little.
Other voices I really appreciate from this dub include Carrie Walren as Headmistress Faragonda, Suzanne Blakesley as Griselda, which is kind of fitting considering she also voices Maleficent in Kingdom Hearts.
Such foolishness. You think you can defeat me? Me, the mistress of all evil!
Mitchell Whitfield as Professor Palladium, D. Bradley Baker as Professor Whizgiz, and the illustrious Grey Delisle as Headmistress Griffin.
With each new year comes a crop of young students aspiring to fine-tune their craft and sharpen their minds.
You and I will be the strongest couple in the entire world. We will dominate the Earth!
Somehow Griffin got even scarier. And I love it. So overall, the Nickelodeon cast primarily comprises well-established actors. There are plenty of career voice actors present, along with mainstream celebrities for marketing purposes, not only including Molly Quinn and Keke Palmer, but also Ariana Grande as Princess Diospro, and Elizabeth Gillies as Daphne the Nymph. And fight me all you want, but Elizabeth is the best voice actress for Daphne, and I will stand by that.
The Cyrenix book is in the magic archive of Althea. Find it at your peril.
The issues primarily appear through the scripts and direction that the actors have to work with, which ain't their fault. But for the most part, the actors range from pretty decent to great fits. Though the Nickelodeon dub seemed to at first pride itself on remaining faithful to the Italian version, that did not wind up being the case. Instead, Nickelodeon Americanized the franchise, albeit in a less obvious, more subtle way than the 4Kids dub. We can't really fault story changes for the 4 one-hour specials made from the original first 2 seasons, given Rainbow produced those, but there were changes on Nickelodeon's part from their dub of Season 3 going forward. Season 3's dub was rushed from November to December of 2011. All episode titles were changed, presumably to make differentiating the Cinelume and Nick dubs easier, but while we could talk about how most of the Nick titles are incredibly generic, seriously, they called the Season 3 finale the final battle, like, come on guys. That is not the real problem. Instead, they are markers of the general trend for the Nickelodeon version to water down the original's maturity. This is perhaps most apparent in the dialogue present in the Nickelodeon scripts.
Go make us some snow cones! I'll take raspberry!
It's almost as if I've been transported back to the days of the 4Kids dub. Dialogue is simplified and at times kidified, and the voice direction as a whole feels lacking. I'm sure the actors did their best, but for the most part they tend to sound like they're all just being rushed through the process to get the season's dubbing over with. Specifically, there's this weird issue in episode 12 of Season 3 where the dialogue sounds clear, but the music and sound effects... just listen.
Magic Winx!
You hear it too, right? It's like they couldn't find a clean version of the episode's background audio to work with, so they ripped a version that wound up being altered in the process. This problem is admittedly less present in the Nick dub of The Secret of the Lost Kingdom movie, but it becomes infinitely worse during their dub of Season 4. Y'all remember.
I was wondering if you'd like to be my forever girlfriend.
When it was originally created, Season 4 worked quite well as an epilogue to the series before its end. It followed the Winx, now young adults, trying to restore magic to the Earth following their graduation from Althea. While it has its own problems, it is still my favorite solely because of how far it was willing to go with the Winx growing up and dealing with more mature adult problems, along with the incredibly dark finale where one of their own actually died. So naturally, considering Rainbow and Nick plan to low-key age down the Winx in Season 5 onward and make them students again, the graduation element is still there, but instead of being full-on professors at Althea in the first episode of Season 4, they're considered teaching assistants in the Nick version.
It's a strange feeling going back to school and being on the other side of the desk.
Yeah, the right side. No more oral presentations, no more tests to pass or homework to do, because this time we're the teachers.
Aisha, we're just teaching assistant, but it is pretty fantastic.
Likewise, most of the dialogue is watered down from the original, and the voice direction is especially lacking. For comparisons between the Cinelume and Nick dubs of Season 4, I highly recommend checking out Winx Club Dissected's video where he tackles episode 17 in particular, comparing specific scenes. Link shall appear in a card, or if the cards decide to be evil, in the description below if you would like to check it out for yourself. This issue would then be baked right into the 5th and 6th seasons given they were a co-production between Rainbow and Nickelodeon. But even then here, there is a stark contrast between the Italian and Nick versions. Take this scene between Selena and Bloom, for instance. This is the original Italian version, with English subtitles for your convenience. Now, listen to the English version by Nickelodeon.
Trust Eldora! Eldora was lame.
Oy vey.
Fool of a took.
The Nickelodeon dub is many people's favorites, and for many, it introduced them to the franchise when perhaps they weren't old enough to have survived the 4Kids era, or maybe they just didn't experience it until Nickelodeon's wider reach in terms of distribution came along. Even so, while I do love many of the actors here, I can't overlook my issues with the scripts and voice direction. If I had to rank it alongside the other dubs, considering Duart and 3 Beep as one single dub, given their voice casts are practically identical, I would have to rank it as my third favorite, between Cinelume and Duart 3 Beep, but above 4Kids and Dubbing Brothers. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, then I think you might enjoy my other content such as my reviews and video essays on animation, particularly RWBY, and definitely, as I said before, all my other Winx videos, whether it's a documentary on the franchise's history or other videos on the dubs. And if you like what you find, then remember to subscribe to the channel and ring that bell for notifications because YouTube hates creators. If you would like to further support myself and the channel, then please consider, if you are able to, pledging your support over on Patreon. I'm currently saving up for publishing costs for my novel next year, so any kind of support is very much appreciated. I'm the Unicorn of War, and this has been a shit show.
I am Stella, Fairy of the Shining Sun.
Lies! Go away, you villain, or you will feel the magic